Picture this. I've followed every budgeting tip, yet when the numbers finally add up, the result is a hollow line, no surplus, no wiggle room. That unsettling blank page sparked a deep dive into the hidden assumptions behind every budget is the answer promise. So, I want to talk about something called loud budgeting. If you haven't heard of it, you're about to. And if you have, stick around, because I think the way most people are talking about it is missing something important, especially if you're starting from pretty much zero like I am. Let me set the scene first. A few months ago, I was having one of those weeks. You know the ones, where you check your account balance and immediately regret it. I had rent coming up, a few random bills, and a friend asking if I wanted to go to a concert that weekend. Tickets were around $80, which for some people is nothing. For me at that point, it was genuinely a stressful amount of money. And I did what I always did. I said, yeah, sure, I'll figure it out. I didn't want to be the person who said no. I didn't want to explain myself. So I went. I put it on my card. I had a decent time. And then I spent the next 2 weeks quietly stressed about it while pretending everything was fine. That's the version of my financial life I was living. Avoidance, deflection, just not talking about money, because talking about it felt embarrassing. So when I came across this loud budgeting thing, I was curious, like genuinely curious, because it seemed like the opposite of what I was doing. Here's the basic idea, if you haven't seen it trending. Loud budgeting is essentially the practice of being open and honest about your financial situation with the people around you. Instead of quietly suffering or going along with things you can't afford, you just say it. You tell your friend you can't make the concert because you're saving money. You suggest a cheaper alternative instead of going to the expensive restaurant. You stop pretending. You stop performing like everything's fine when it isn't. And at first I thought, okay, that sounds simple enough, almost too simple. Like, is just saying the words out loud actually going to change anything? But then I started thinking about where this trend even came from, and it made more sense. It picked up momentum in early 2024 when someone posted about shifting their goal from earning more to just being honest about what they had. That clip resonated with a lot of people, and you can see why, honestly. There's something really powerful about someone publicly opting out of the pressure to keep up. Because that pressure is real. It's not just social media pressure either. It's the pressure you feel when your coworkers are planning a group dinner at a place that costs $40 a plate. It's the pressure when your family expects gifts at every occasion. It's the low-grade stress of everyone around you spending at a level you can't actually match, and not wanting to be the one who admits it. Loud budgeting kind of gave people language for saying no without shame, and that's where it gets interesting for me. My first reaction to learning about this was a mix of relief and skepticism. The relief part was obvious, like there's a name for what I probably should have been doing all along. Just being honest. Not going to the concert when I couldn't afford it, not putting myself in stressful financial situations to save face, but the skeptical part of me started asking questions. What actually changes if you're just vocal about not spending? Like, you're still broke, you're still in the same situation, saying no to things is great, but what are you saying yes to? Where's the money actually going if you're cutting things out? That's where I think a lot of people skip over the important part of it. Because here's what I noticed when I started paying attention to how loud budgeting gets talked about online. It's very focused on the social aspect, the saying no, the announcing your goals, the being public about your limits. And that stuff isn't bad, but it's kind of like half the picture. If you're telling people you're on a budget, but you don't actually have a budget, then you're just telling people you're broke, which, again, not bad, but it doesn't do much on its own. I tried a version of this myself. For a couple of weeks, I started just being more upfront with people. When my friends were planning something expensive, instead of vaguely going along with it and then panicking, I'd say something like, hey, that's out of my price range this month, can we do something else? And honestly, the social side of it felt better than I expected. Most people didn't care. A couple of my friends said they were glad I said something because they were also stretched thin but didn't want to be the first to admit it. So that part worked. The saying the thing out loud part, it reduced the anxiety around money conversations a little bit. But I quickly realized that the honesty alone wasn't changing my actual numbers. I was still not really tracking anything. I was still not sure where my money was going. I was just declining some things and still spending pretty freely on other things without any real structure behind it. That's when it clicked for me. Loud budgeting without actual budgeting is kind of like announcing you're on a diet without changing what you eat. You're putting the performance of it out there, but the behavior underneath hasn't shifted in any meaningful way. And I think this is especially true when you're starting from close to nothing, because when the margin is already really thin, the problem isn't just social pressure. The problem is that every dollar needs to be working. You can't afford to cut one thing and then let money drift somewhere unaccounted for. So I started thinking about what this would actually look like if someone in my situation tried to do it properly. Not just loud budgeting in the social sense, but combining that honesty with some actual structure. The structure part felt overwhelming at first. I'd heard of things like the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of income to needs, 30% to wants, 20% to savings, which sounds clean and logical. But when I tried to apply it to what I was actually working with, it didn't really fit. If most of your income is already being eaten by essentials, there isn't a clean 30% sitting around for wants. That rule was designed for someone who already has enough breathing room to divide things up neatly. What actually made more sense to me was starting smaller than that. Like, forget the percentages for a second. Just figure out what's actually coming in and what's actually going out. All of it. Every subscription, every coffee, every random thing that gets added to a cart at midnight. I did this exercise where I just wrote down every single expense from the past month, and it was uncomfortable because I found stuff I'd completely forgotten about. A streaming service I wasn't using, a subscription that had auto-renewed without me noticing, little leaks that didn't seem like much on their own but were adding up. That was more useful than any budgeting framework I'd read about, just looking at the actual reality of what was happening with my money. And here's where the loud budgeting piece came back in and actually made sense to me in a new way. Once I had that clearer picture, the social side of it became more intentional. Instead of just declining things randomly, I had a reason. Like, I know I need this much to cover my actual expenses. I'm trying to build even a small emergency cushion, so that means this is the discretionary amount I have, and I'm choosing not to spend it on this particular thing. That's a different kind of no. It's not just saying no to look responsible or because it's trending. It's saying no because you actually understand where the money needs to go. The shift felt small, but it was real. It's the difference between performing financial boundaries and actually having them. One thing that came up when I was researching this topic is how much of loud budgeting became a performance online. People posting about saying no to things for the engagement, not necessarily because they had real goals behind it. And I get it. I understand the appeal. Financial content does well because a lot of people are stressed about money and looking for relatable stuff. But when the goal becomes the applause rather than actual change, nothing really moves forward. I don't want to be that version of it. Not on this channel and not in my own life. What I care about is whether the thing actually does something, whether my situation is concretely different because of it. And the honest answer so far is that the loud budgeting experiment gave me something I didn't expect, which was permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to have the uncomfortable conversation instead of avoiding it. Permission to say, I can't do that right now, without needing to dress it up or make excuses. That part has real value, especially if you're like me and you grew up in a household where money was either not talked about or was a source of stress that nobody really addressed head on. Just getting comfortable with saying the words, I can't afford that, or that's not where I want to put money right now, takes practice. It feels weird at first, and then it gets a little easier, but I want to be careful about something. I don't want to dress up doing nothing as doing something, because just being loud about your budget without building one is still going to leave you in the same place. So here's what I'm actually taking away from all of this, and what I'm going to keep working on. First, the transparency piece has value. I'm going to keep being honest with people around me about my financial limits, not dramatically, not in a way that makes every social situation about my bank account, but in a matter-of-fact way, because the stress of pretending is genuinely worse than the mild awkwardness of just saying it. Second, the loudness needs to be backed by something real. For me, that means actually knowing my numbers, not perfectly, not in some complicated spreadsheet I'll never look at again, just knowing roughly what comes in, what absolutely has to go out, and what's left over, even if that leftover amount is small. Third, I'm trying to think about where any extra dollar can go, even if it's tiny, because starting from zero doesn't mean you do nothing. It means you start smaller than the advice usually assumes you can. $5 into savings is $5. It's not glamorous, it doesn't make for a great thumbnail, but it's real, and it's mine, and it's building something even if the building is slow. The biggest thing loud budgeting taught me has less to do with budgeting and more to do with honesty. The financial version of keeping up appearances is exhausting and expensive, and the moment you stop doing it even a little bit, there's this small but noticeable reduction in stress. That concert I mentioned at the beginning, if I could go back, I'd say no. Not because $80 is going to change my entire financial trajectory, but because I spent more energy worrying about it than enjoying it. And that's the real cost that never shows up in the math. If you're trying to figure this stuff out like I am, you might want to subscribe. I'm testing these ideas in real life, not from a position of already having it figured out. And I want to document what actually helps and what just sounds good in theory. There's a lot of financial advice out there that works great if you already have a solid foundation. I'm trying to figure out what works when you don't. That's what this channel is for. If you're still putting the pieces together on how budgeting actually connects to the bigger picture, YouTube thinks you'll like the video showing on your screen right now. It helped me understand another part of this that wasn't clicking for me, and it's worth watching next. Check it out.